Today we're going to be going over how to take what you see here in your normal knowledge of console logs and turn it into something that looks like this. Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of DevDrawer. Today we're going to be continuing with our vanilla JavaScript, or in this case, we're actually going to be building out something that's just using the console log. So there's not going to be a front-facing site or anything like that. I'm just using the index.html so I can run my live server over here. But essentially we're just going to be building out some cool things that you can do inside of this console window. And if you're unfamiliar with how to get here, essentially you can just right-click. You probably can't see this, but there's an inspect. So you hit inspect, it'll bring up this, and then we click on the console window, or you can hit F12 on your keyboard and that'll bring up the console window as well, or the developers tools, then you can click on the console window. So I'm going to show you some pretty cool things that we can do with the console log that you may not know about, and if you do know about them, that's great. It's a cool way to kind of be able to debug some of your code and show errors and warnings the proper way. So if you like this kind of tutorial, give me a thumbs up. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button for me and turn on the bell notifications, and that'll greatly help me out. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, this isn't going to have a front-facing website. It's basically just going to be a whole bunch of script that's pushed out inside the console. But I am, again, using it for the live server part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and write script. And this is where you would do it inside your own JavaScript that you would then call, but this is going to be, it's going to serve the purpose that I need it to. First thing I want to show you is this really cool thing that after all these years of development I didn't know about until recently, but you can just type in debugger as a JavaScript and it'll actually put your code in debugger mode. So anything that you add in your JavaScript below that, you can actually see it as it happens. So let's say if we come down here and we want to create a variable, so I'm going to do var width equals 100, and then let's do another one, var height equals 100 as well. So now if we let me exit out of this and let's do a refresh. Now we can see that our debugger is paused and we can actually parse through it. So step over, step into. So if we step over this, it'll bring us to our next variable that we have here. And then if we step over again, now we have this width is being defined. The height is currently undefined because it's just now getting to this variable. It hasn't actually set it yet. But any code that we add underneath this will actually be able to use it within our code. And we can also come over here and we can create a breakpoint here for this variable. So if we want to check and make sure that this variable is being hit, we can actually check that. But for right now, I'm going to turn off the debugger in the code. I'll leave it in there so that whenever you download this from GitHub, you can use it yourself and kind of see everything that it can produce. But right now, I just want to show you some of this console information. So first thing, if we come in here and we do a console log, so we do console log, and then when I want to do console log width, and then I'm also going to copy this and I'm going to do height. This will give me the two numbers that we put in there. So right now they're both 100. We have no idea which one is which unless we go back and we look at line 6 and line 7. So there's a way that you can change that. So we can also do a console, so console.log, and then we wrap it in curly brackets. So we can do width like this, and now we can see that our width is 100. And let's go ahead and also do this for the height. So we can have these two variables available to us, and we know what these numbers are for compared to them just being numbers here. And we can also combine this into one single line. So we can do console.log, and then we can do width with a comma and then height here. And now we'll have a console log with the width and the height all in the same line. So that's something pretty cool. You can create these variables and then actually be able to populate your script to show you what these variables have in them. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier for you to maintain your code. Alright, so let's go down a little bit further, and I'm going to put in some comment here so that you can kind of see where we're at whenever you're going to look at the code. So let me see. I want to do. I'm gonna add a comment log here. So this is going to be show name values. Okay, so let's go down a little bit further, and now we're going to go over different kinds of messages you can produce. Right now we're only using the console log, so let's say we want to do show specific types of console messages. So the first one obviously is going to be console.log, and inside of this I'm just going to put this is a message so you can see the difference between them. The next one we're going to do is console.info, and this one's kind of like console log, so this is just to be this is information. So this one's not very different as you can see here, but whenever we get into the next part of it, we're going to do console.error, and then this is an error message. So now we actually see that it's highlighted in red. So whenever you're doing your your if for each loops or whatever in JavaScript, and you want to validate to see if something's pulling over, if it's valid or not, this is a good way to show that so you can quickly see. And then you can also filter these levels down. So you probably can't see this, but if you click on default levels, you can actually turn off other things. So let's say I want to turn off the information one, turn off warnings, so forth and so on. Switch back over to default so you can see all of them. And then next part, we're going to do console.warn, and then this is let's see, this is a warning. So this will show us in a yellow highlight so that we can see that as well. So this is kind of the differences between the error messages, so we can kind of see what we're looking for here very quickly. Okay, so another cool thing is assertions. So typically you would do like an if statement, so forth and so on, in order to get something. So what I want to do is kind of minify that code a little bit. So we're going to do errors and assertions. Let's see, assertions. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to create a simple function. It's going to be called test, and we're going to pass a message variable to that function. So I'm going to come down here and we're going to run test, and we're not going to pass anything right now. So it's not showing any error messages because our function test doesn't actually do anything. So inside of this function, let's create a console error. So let's say if the message doesn't exist, we want to show an error message. So we're going to do console.error, and then this is going to be message is not defined. So now we should get a message is not defined error here, so we can actually see what our the message is not being defined, so we know where to look on line 23. But also we can come in here and do an else statement, and we want to do an assertion. So an assertion basically says that we're asserting that this thing is true, false, or accurate. If not, then we want to display this assertion message. So let's come down here, and in our function I want to create another test, and I'm going to pass MSG on it. So this is going to, it's not going to show anything right now because it's just, the variable is, it's not hitting this. So what we want to do is, let's say we want to check to see if that length is over a certain amount of characters. So we're going to do console.assert. So we're going to do console assert, and then message.length. Message.length, we want to see if it's less than or equal to 5 characters. If it's not, we're going to use this little tick character, and we're going to actually print out the message that we're sending. So we're going to do $ this, or $ curly bracket, and then message is not over 5 characters. And then I'm just going to end that with a backtick. So right now, this next part, we can see that we entered in MSG. MSG is down here, which it's currently not over 5 characters. But if we change this to message, now that message will go away and that variable becomes available to us inside of this function. So we can come over here and we can do something like console.log message, and then we can do whatever we want to with it. So right now I don't want it to display the message, so I'm going to take this and I'm also going to put message here, and I'm just going to copy this function over and add this to the next line so you can see what it looks like whenever it works. And it basically doesn't do anything, but as you can see, it's updating in real time what I'm trying to do, so you can kind of see that the assert is working as it's supposed to be working. There's another really cool thing. So let's say if we have an error and we can't really figure out where that error is coming from, we can do something like this. It's called a trace. So we're going to set up a trace, and then we're going to create a function. So let's say function1, and that's not going to do anything right now. Let's create another function, function2, and then inside of this function we want to do a console.trace. So we want to figure out what's going wrong between these two. So it's just a simple, I'm just going to run the function2 inside of my 1 so that we can see it happening. And then over here I'm going to call that function. So we're just going to do 1. And right now, let's see, function2 console trace. So I'm missing the parentheses here. And right now we got a console trace where it's telling us that 2 is being called by 1 on these lines, so that we can kind of see, if we ever have an issue with trying to figure out where a function's hitting another function, we can throw a console trace in there and it'll kind of trace back what we need it to do. And again, this is all stuff that you can see within the debugger, but for right now it's kind of a way that you can print it out yourself to make it a little bit easier for you to be able to figure out what may be going wrong in certain places, and if your functions are being called the way that you think they were being called. Okay, so let's move on to another one, and let's say I want to do grouping with this one. So grouping is pretty cool because right now we have all of these variables that are available to us. They're kind of all over the place, but I want to break it down so that we can see multiple variables in one section, and that's a cool thing that you can do with grouping. So I'm going to create a variable. So we're going to do let groups equal to, and I'm just going to create a simple array. Let's see, group1, and then this, and we're going to do a bracket, and we're just going to say 1, 2, and 3, and then let's do another group. Let's say group 2, and this one's going to be 4 and 5. Okay, so now we have this group array. So I want to take, and you can also do this in single ways, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, but I'm going to do a for loop. So we're going to do for group in groups, and then this for loop, we're going to use this console.group to display our group, and it's basically going to take this name and it's going to put it into different groups for us. So we got a console.group, and then for each group we want to display something inside of it. So we're going to do groups group, and then for each, and we're just going to do G for group, console.log, and G, and then we finally want to come down here and do console.group end, and we're going to end that group. So now we should have two sections. We have group 1 and group 2 with the variables in between it. So that's the way that you can do it with the loop using an array, but we can also come in here and say that we want to do it manually. So we're going to do the same thing again. So we're going to do console.group, and we're just going to name this one group 1, and then below that we're going to do console.log, and we're just going to do 1. And let me go ahead and do our 2 and our 3 just so it matches what we have above. So we got 2 and 3, and then we're going to end this console group 1. So we're going to do group end. So now we have this group 1. It's been manually done. There's also something else pretty cool that you can do with your group. So let's say inside of this we want to have the first one open, but we want to have a collapsed group. So we can come over here and do console.group collapsed, and then I'm just going to name this. So we're going to name it collapsed. And then inside of this, I'm going to do console.log for console.log 5, and then we're going to do console.group end collapsed. So now we have group 1 with the collapsed variables inside of it. And we can also take this collapsed and move it off outside of the group. Right now it's kind of contained inside of this group 1. But that's essentially how you can do grouping. It's pretty cool where you can kind of group your variables together so that whenever you're looking at them, you're not seeing like all of this information. You're kind of seeing it grouped together by what it should be grouped together by. So if you have an array, you want to keep that array, inside of its own group. You can come in here and just, even if you don't have, 2 sections to a group 1 and group 2, you can just come in here and have just the arrays here, or the array variables, and then over here you can do this for loop and then group each one of these into its group. So it's pretty cool where you can just kind of keep your information together. Okay, so taking that, so we have these groups set up. We can also display tables inside of the console log, which is pretty cool because the tables actually keep their structure. If you copy them, you can actually copy them to Excel, and they'll keep their structure with their, I guess their titles or their names or whatever they are, and then it'll contain the data. So whatever you display in this table, you can just highlight it, copy and paste into Excel, and it just works. So in order to do that, I'm going to create another like array. So I'm going to do a let tables equals this, and I'm going to set this up a little bit differently because the way that the table is going to display. So we're going to do 1, and that's going to be the ID. So we're going to do the first part, let's do name, and this is going to be test1, and then email, and it's going to be, let's say, like test1@example.com. And let me go ahead and do the same thing for 2 and 3. So 2 and 3. So I'm just going to create my objects here, and this is going to be 2, 2, 3, 3. Okay, so now we have this table that's available to us. And right now I'm using like a defined table, but you can actually, grab an ID from the website, and let's say if you wanted to do something like you want to see all of the links on your page, you can come in there and grab the, using your, get by ID, I believe it is. You can go in there and grab an ID of, your page and then loop through each of your ahrefs. But for right now, I'm kind of simplifying it so we can actually see the table data being parsed from an array, so it's a little bit easier to understand. But we can do something like console.table, and then I'm just going to pass that tables variable to it. And that'll give us our table data here. So like I said, we can just highlight all of these, copy it, and paste it into Excel, and it'll actually paste out exactly how it is here. And then we also have the object reference here so we can see what's coming through. Okay, so let's say we want to close this down. So let's say I'm going to add another variable here, and it's going to be phone, and then let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. So for this phone, I'm just going to add this on here so it displays inside of our table. But let's say if I didn't want to display this information. So let's say if I just want to name an email, there's a way that you can filter it out here as well. So we can do console.log, not console.log, so console.table, and then we're going to pass tables again, and then we're going to define the columns that we want to pull. So the first one is going to be name, and then the second one is going to be email. And we only pull those two columns that we're looking for. So it's still gathering the phone data, it's just not pulling it. So let's see, I want to go back over here, and I'm going to turn on the debugger again, and so we can kind of go through and see everything that is being pulled. So let's go ahead and step into each one of these, and you can see how, like right now, if I hover over width, it says 100, and height, if I hover over it, it says 100. I don't know if you can see that, but if you hover over it, it'll show you what the value of that is. So let's keep going down. So we have our console log here. Also, there is this let groups and let tables. Currently, you can see how they're undefined just because it hasn't hit that part yet. But essentially, it's going through it line by line. So eventually, when we get down to the end, these will be filled out, and you'd be able to see the information. Also, another cool thing is that whenever you're inside of this debugger, you can see that this is an error message and this is a warning message, and it shows you different highlights of what it is, so that you can kind of see as you're going through it as well. So let's keep stepping down, and as you can see, it's hitting our functions, and we can see that this message is currently undefined. That's the reason why its message is not defined. If we keep going through, it's going to hit our other function where now message is defined, so it's going to go down to our assert. So now we are inside of our assert, and we keep on going, and then the next one is just going to see if it's defined, which currently message equals message, and right now it's not hitting that assert, so it's just exiting out of that function. Okay, let's keep going down a little bit more. So now we have this function 1 that's going to call the function 2 and then the console trace. So it's hitting this, and then it's adding that console trace for us. And let's keep going. So now let's expand out some of these options that we have here. And this is just what it's collecting as it's going through. You can see here we got our function. We're currently on the function 2 call stack. We've already hit the 1, and then the anonymous is where it actually was called here on line 44. So let's keep going. So now we're inside of this groups. The groups is currently undefined, so if we go through that, now we can see our groups is defined inside of our script, and we can see it here so that we can parse through it. And again, if we're having issues with this specific line, we can actually put a breakpoint right here, so that whenever we hit this, it just goes down to the next breakpoint, which I'll show you that in a minute as well. So let's keep going down a little bit more, and we're hitting this console group, and then it's going to be producing the groups that we want here, and we're currently on the 1G, which would be the individual group item. So we're on 1 here, and if we keep going through, it's going to start showing us the other information for 2, and then it's going to hit 3, and then 4, and now we're at 4, and then 5, and then it's going to finally get to the end of the group, and it's going to exit out of that for loop, and then it's going to console log that group. So continuing down, pretty much the same thing that we just did. It's already grabbed our variables up here, so these variables are set, and right now it's just running through the console that we have out. So now we're at tables, currently undefined, and we're on the next section now, which now has that tables defined, so we can view this information in real time as we're doing it. And then finally going through it again and hitting the table, and then that's it. So once we get done, it's trying to now hit the reload.js that I have, so I'm just going to exit out of that, and I'm going to come back over here to this index. And let's say I want to put let's put a breakpoint right there. So whenever we go to reload this page, it's going to hit the debugger, and then if we continue through, and we can pause on that breakpoint that we just set to be able to see that yes, our groups are being set, and this is the group in, so obviously this is not going to show anything inside of our console for us, or it's not going to show anything inside of our what is this thing called? The debugger. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. But it's not going to show anything inside of our debugger. But it will pause there so that we can see that the values that we're grabbing, and we can kind of, come through here, and let's say we want to look at groups here, we can just kind of hover over things as they've been run, because everything up to this point has already been run. So let's look at some of the other things that may be interesting. So we don't have any current watch. Our call stack is using this anonymous function here. We don't have any DOM breakpoints because we don't have a DOM setup. It's just the console. We also don't have any kind of like Ajax or fetch or anything set up either. No global listeners, no event listener breakpoints. Like if we wanted to, we can come over here and check on this mouse, and every single time the mouse moves, there's that breakpoint that we can hit as well. And then this right here, we don't have any. I mean, it's a local site, so there's going to be no violations that we need to worry about. Let's go ahead and continue on through here. So now our script is fully loaded, the console is fully output. Well, I think that is it for this tutorial. It was a quick tutorial, some pretty cool stuff that you can do inside of your console log. I mean, if you have a large project, console logs maybe not the best way to debug your code. Using the debugger would probably be the best way to do your debug your code. So make sure that you keep track of this right here, because this right here is important. It makes it a lot easier to kind of debug as you're going through. But if you have to produce an error message that's visible on the front end, using the console log is a really good way to go. This is pretty much any of the console log functionality I've ever used. So it's pretty cool to kind of see like one document that has everything in it. So hopefully you liked this tutorial. If you did, let me know that you liked it by giving me a thumbs up on it, or leave me a comment if you have any questions, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. But for now, I think that that's going to do it for this tutorial. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.